Tanks, DPS, and healers. These roles are usually your traditional party makeup for any kind of video game, MMO, D&D group, real-life friend group, the perfect balance of defense, damage, and obviously healing. Final Fantasy XIV is no different in that it follows the same exact principle for its own parties in the game. 1 tank, 1 healer, and 2 DPSs for a light party, and then you double that number for a full party. And on its own, without doing the hardest content in 14, Savage, or Ultimate, 14 is a fairly easy game to play through. This is designed in a way that no normal fight to stop players from progressing in the story, and that's extremely understandable. However, I decided recently to do something that many would call stupid, insane, or even impossible. Today, I present to you the start of a series idea I had for a long time. Can I play through Final Fantasy XIV as a healer? Oh, too simple? Too boring? Okay. How about, can I play through Final Fantasy XIV as a healer, but with a party full of only healers and no DPSs or tanks? Oh, okay, now you guys sound interested. Alright. In this series, I've titled Healers Only. Ho, if you will. In my 14 hoeing series, I have a few rules that I've in place onto myself that I need to follow by. The first rule is that I must create a character to play from start to finish in base game A Realm Reborn, so no existing characters. So, goodbye, Kougaon Shirogane. Rule number 2 is fairly obvious. Only healers in the party, never a DPS or a tank is allowed in content. Because of that, things like tank busters and damage checks will be a huge hurdle to leap over, but we'll figure it out. Maybe. Number 3 is that I cannot play any DPS or tank jobs, leaving me with only White Mage, Scholar, Astro, and Sage as my only 4 healers available in the game. I will, however, make myself one exception. I will allow myself 1 DPS class to unlock, and that will be Arcanist. The reason being is because the Scholar job is locked behind that, so that makes it fair for me to get it. And for the last rule, I must make the game even harder for myself in that I must change the party settings to like minimum item level when possible. Meaning that it makes it so that my gear is set to the lowest possible requirement to do said content, making it much more tougher for me to survive things and hit lower. And for the other setting that I'll be adjusting is the no echo option. After failing a fight and your whole party wipes, the next time you get up, you'll get a buff called the Echo. The Echo provides you with things like maximum HP buff, damage dealt, and the potency of your HP restoration is increased as well. This makes it so it's much more easier to get past that content, but it's not required to clear, so we're gonna make it harder for ourselves, and if we fail a fight, we just have to go through it until we finally clear. And those are the big rules, and with that, I already have a few challenges that I have to face. The first challenge is, well, mostly for myself. I don't really have that much experience in healing. I'll have to get used to being a healer, as it's my most underplayed role in the game, so healing will be tough for me as a DPS and tank main, because I might get lost in the DPS sauce a little bit and forget to heal people when I'm actually playing a healer. Another challenge that I have is I have to use Party Finder only to basically find all the healers that I need or ask others, thus making this healers only challenge really reliant on the help of others who are willing enough and crazy enough to help me on this adventure. And to help things out, I do stream my progress, so if you ever want to join me or just watch me doing this live, always follow my Twitch channel. And as I've said earlier, we will lack damage, and tank busters, which is meant for tanks to absorb this huge amount of damage, will demolish nearly anyone else that is not a tank. We will need to work around these in order to succeed. The question is, will we succeed, or is this all doomed to fail? We'll find out as we keep going. And I'll let you guys know right now, what you'll see with this series is that it'll start off really simple, but then get agonizing as I keep playing through it. With all these conditions out of the way, let's go ahead and get into today's sponsor of the video. Today's sponsor of the video is Tokyo Treats and Sakura Co. When you're playing the hit MMORPG Final Fantasy XIV, you want to probably have some kind of snack near you, right? Well, I got great news for you. With either Tokyo Treat or Sakura Co, you can have Japanese snacks delivered right to your home, so you don't have to give up your grind. The goals of these companies is that they want to invite everyone to experience Japan from the comfort of their own homes through the snack boxes. And as a person who has had these boxes before, I can assure you that these snacks will keep you satiated when you are hungry. And by using my code Kougaon, you can get some money off of your first purchase of your boxes. As you can see, there are 2 different boxes, so what exactly does each one give? Tokyo Treat is a monthly Japanese snack box where you'll get up to 20 exclusive limited edition seasonal flavored Japanese snacks. And between you and me, these snacks are kind of hard to find. Like, try walking into a Walmart and trying to find a Sakura Pepsi or Japanese peach Kit Kats, which sounds really delicious, by the way. And the theme for this month's box for Tokyo Treat is Mount Fuji Snack Venture. Ever fantasize about wanting to go to Mount Fuji and eat all the snacks along the way? Well, this is the best way to do it. Each of these snacks that have been chosen for this box have been curated to give you the best taste of all the snacks around Japan and also Mount Fuji. They even packed a DIY kit for ice cream candy. These snacks look really good, and honestly, who wouldn't want some crunky chocolate almond bites? And don't worry, if you don't understand Japanese, there is a booklet that kind of gives you a bit of info on each of the snacks and allergens and what they have. And other snacks include Mount Fuji green tea cake, Mount Fuji sandwich cookie, sweet potato sable cookie, and a wasabi potato chip. I hope it's not as spicy as it sounds. Now, what if the pop culture vibe isn't for you and you want something more artesian and more authentic to Japanese snacks? Well, look no further, because Sakura Co is right for you. Sakura Co supports local Japanese snack makers, and each box comes with 20 traditional, authentic, and artesian Japanese snacks. And for those who enjoy teas, well, it also comes with that too. And my absolute favorite part is that it comes with these cute special Japanese tablewares. This month's tableware is the Wasaka Crane Chopsticks. I'm sure this is a great tableware for anybody who uses chopsticks, but unfortunately for me, I don't know how to use chopsticks at the age 27, being an Asian male. Yeah, go ahead, laugh it up, I know. The theme for Sakura Co's box is Wonders of Saitama. Saitama City is a place that has both traditional and modern aspects of Japan, and it's just one step away from Tokyo. Some of the snacks feature the Saitama pear gummies, milk castella cakes, curry senbei, and daifuku. From Tokyo Treat, I tried the peach Kit Kats, and they check out with me. I love them so much. And from Sakura Co, I tried the milk castella cakes, and these were basically like donut holes that were really light and just hit the spot. It was just perfect. I didn't feel too full after eating them. Get yourself or your loved one a box, because these make great gifts. Check out the links below, and don't forget to use code Kougaon for $5 off your first purchase of Sakura Co or Tokyo Treat. We start off our healer-only journey by spending the first 30 minutes in character customization. Yes, it's that important to us. Now, could I have gone with the most cliche option and chose a typical cat girl? No, we didn't pick that. Instead, I went with a cute, Elezen elf-like girl, because tall women are kind of my weakness, and they deserve a bit more love. And I'm also tall myself, don't think I'm shorter than 5'5", please. Racial bonuses in 14 are as important as paying taxes, so we ignore that. She's actually really cute, so if you look like this in real life, hit me up. And of course, we have to pick the only healer job available, so that means we have to start with Conjurer, which eventually turns into White Mage. And an important choice is the data center and server. Anyone on the same regional data center can play with another data center, and the server is not really that important at the moment. With so many regional choices, I eventually settled on the North American Data Center Dynamis, the newest one. Mostly because of connections and less of a chance for having any lag-related problems, and I picked the Dynamis DC instead of my home data center, the Primal DC, because I couldn't really get into my home server Leviathan, but also if I ever chose to settle on this character and get a house on Dynamis, it's a pretty dead DC, so there's a good chance I can get a house. And because of how dead this DC is when compared to the other DCs, there is a EXP boost incentive for players to join this DC so they can get an advantage over the other ones. Overall, it'll just be really great to level up my other healer jobs. And with that, players who are on the North American data centers can only play with me, so I'm so sorry to all 12 players on the Oceanic servers. And for the final important choice in this character creation, my Elezen name. I spent a good deal of time trying to pick out the best name, but I eventually settled on we could do it! And because I'm going through the long and grueling story of A Realm Reborn once more of base 14, I decided I will be skipping a majority of the cutscenes. I'm sorry, cutscene watchers, I've already watched it once, please don't subject me to that ever again. When I finally have control of my character, I realize something huge. Oh no! Oh, now everything's back to the basic shit. My HUD, my UI, hotkeys, everything was set up to the basic default 14 setup. It would be so time consuming to change everything back to the way I had it, and I didn't remember everything off the top of my head either. And if you didn't know this, you can in fact copy your settings from one character to another, but that would require me to re-log in and do everything all over. I said screw it, I'll just do everything off stream and just deal with the basic setup for 14. Surely I shouldn't have any problems using the basic setup, right? It won't bite me in the ass later. And going through the early game of 14 is like a weird, charming and like familiar feel, but yet at the same time I'm reminded of all the painful things that I cannot do at the early game stages. I can't even fly on my mount until I beat a Realm Reborn first, and I can't teleport to anywhere where I don't have an Aetherite stone registered with. And a lot of the early game skills are obtained through the class quests, which are not too bad to do, but you know, they're just a little bit tedious when you have to go through it once more on other characters. But skipping forward, getting past all the nostalgia and the early game of 14, we will head into the first piece of content, Satasha, the first ever dungeon you unlock when playing 14. Finally, the real journey begins. And because it's the first dungeon of the game, it's arguably the easiest dungeon of them all. Let me rephrase that. It's the easiest dungeon when you have a traditional party, but we're going in with a full set of healers, so we'll see how this one goes. So many questions arise, like who's gonna be the tank, who will be doing a lot of the healing, and we also have to juggle DPS to take down the mobs killing us. As we are super early in the game, we have no AoE abilities on all of us healers. In fact, I get my first AoE ability at level 45. Holy. As in, holy cow, we have to use our single target spells until all the mobs are dead. And rather than try to pull the enemies by small groups, we decide to go with big pulls because, you know what, we gotta make things hard and interesting, right? But one of my friends, Pink Nail Boy, runs far ahead and grabs a little more than we can chew for. I don't have rescue. There is no rescue at this level. He's trolling this whole run already. What are you doing? Oh my god. And we were dying, and then we had our first death as a group. You know what? It was gonna happen eventually. There's no way we're gonna do a deathless run. Not today, but one day we'll do a deathless run of 14 hardcore. We'll see if that can happen. Alright, round 2 of the dungeon, and we keep moving without doing too many baby pulls because we have to make it challenging and exciting. And we are actually making progress. We had a few close calls and pulling a little bit too big, but we did pretty well. We slowly inch our way towards the end of the first area, and we finally face our first boss of the dungeon, and effectively, the whole entire run. Our first boss being Chopper. And no, not that Chopper. Chopper is this co-Earl, like a lion-like enemy. He's really simple, nothing crazy here. Meowcetus is our tank for this run, and she's doing a great job, minus, you know, getting chunked by the boss and all their attacks. But honestly, this was way more manageable than fighting all the mobs and enemies we were having trouble with earlier. Overall, really smooth and easy fight, but it won't be like this the whole entire run, and it will get way more painful as I keep progressing from dungeon to dungeon. Then, just making our way throughout the dungeon, we take down the second boss, the third, and finally the last boss of the dungeon, Den the Sahagin, a fish-like guy thing. Other than to basically attack and heal through his attacks, he does have a mechanic in his fight. He'll basically summon additional enemies that we call ads in the game, and we have to stop him before he does that. And it's not that hard, you just basically walk over to the ripples and interact with it to stop the ads from coming in. Normally, when you play 14, however, he's super easy to beat, and you can just focus him down and ignore everything else. But for our group, we whittled down his HP slowly and eventually finished him off, clearing our first dungeon. The dungeon itself took us about 22 minutes, which would normally be done within like, I don't know, 10 to 15 minutes, but it's okay. This was just a glimpse of what's to come in this run. Long dungeons and basically harder and harder fights as we keep going. And I don't know, call me crazy, but I was all for it. Moving on to the second dungeon, we mixed up the crew to get some new healers in, and we are at Tom Tara Deep Croth. Things are pretty standard for the most part, until we forget to heal. And per usual, we have to grab more enemies to make it more intense, because if we're not sweating, we're not really playing. We started creating different roles for one another. We had one person try to grab as much aggro as they can, one is spamming out the heals, being the true healer of the group, and the final two would just act as DPS. So overall, we were kind of like a traditional party, only except there's a lot more chaos, because it was still kind of hard to manage all the aggro from all the enemies because we had no real tank. And the calls get closer and closer. Omar nearly dying over here, and you know, stress is kicking in just a little bit, but we recovered. And I actually messed up so much during this because I'm not used to clicking on some of my skills, but I swear to God, if I was able to just take the time to copy the HUD for my other character, things would be much more smoother. The final mob room is a bit chaotic with all the AoEs going off in the enemies, but we make it work and we got through it. The final boss of this dungeon is a cameo from Baldur's Gate 3, the Mind Flare. We make quick work of him and we finish the dungeon easy peasy. Dungeon number 3 is Copperbell Mines, and during this dungeon we encounter our first big mechanic that will start being prevalent in other content of this game, so this is where it starts to get tricky. But before we get there, of course we're struggling with all the mobs out here. It is not a fun time until we get our AoE skills, which I hope will be soon. And boss number 1, Katos, a big giant man. And that mechanic I was talking about earlier, yeah, here's where we encounter our first ever tank buster. If you are unfamiliar with what a tank buster is, well, I can explain it real quickly. A tank buster is a mechanic where, as the name implies, is an attack that's meant for the tank job to take on and deal with, usually indicated by the red circular thing with the arrow pointing down. And at the same time, you really shouldn't stand next to anybody who has a tank buster or else you could get hit. Whoever is receiving the tank buster will be hit with a large amount of damage that only ideally the tank can really take on because they have a large health pool and defense when compared to the other roles. However, we're 4 healers, so this will be interesting to take. Oh, no! No! Okay, so I survived at full HP without even needing a shield from another healer. I may have made it sound way more dramatic and more dangerous, but trust me, this is the start of something dangerous to come. The second tank buster from the boss doesn't hurt as much either, and we take it down with ease. But please, you guys have to respect it later. Trust me, it comes back later and it hurts. The final boss is also very easy. We managed to get through it, and someone tried to troll me with a rescue, but they pulled me not even anywhere close to the AoE. And that was the end of stream number 1. We took down the first 3 dungeons, which took around 20 plus minutes. This is the real content of this healer run. It was pretty simple so far, and I really hope the game keeps up the same cadence as we keep playing. It doesn't. Now, before I continue with the rest of this video, I want to just note that I made a big oopsie for stream number 2. I actually don't have stream number 2's recording, so that means no 1000 Maws of Totorak dungeon or the first trial battle with Ifrit. But I'm not gonna lie to you, nothing really crazy happens in that stream anyways, and the other parts actually start to ramp up the difficulty much more. But I also received my Jobstone, which means I was able to promote myself to White Mage from Conjurer at level 30, and that was a big boost for my job. Between both streams, I was able to swap my HUD back to my main one, so things should be hopefully easier and I won't mess up at all. And we are at the next dungeon, Hawk Manor. This is where things start to get really rough. Oh yeah, it was time to suffer. Now, if you may notice, you see that I'm having a rough time trying to keep people alive, right? Well, there's a reason for that. In my normal setup on my main, I actually replace Cure 1 with Cure 2 entirely, so it's usually off my bar or off to a part where I really don't need it. So as I'm desperately trying to cast Cure 2 onto my teammates without realizing that this is a level 28 dungeon, and you don't have Cure 2 unlocked because it comes at level 30. I take full responsibilities for these deaths, and I'm sorry, teammates. The mobs were rough, but I was no baby, and we had to do our big pulls like I promised, and we actually figured out a really weird strat just for this dungeon specifically. One person grabs all the enemies and just kite around the main staircase near the beginning of when we started the dungeon. While they run around, the rest of the group will try to pick off the enemies one by one and just keep this up until they're all dead. We finally managed to take down the large group of mobs, and it doesn't get any easier, unfortunately. It's a struggle. In fact, we had to reuse the strategy again by bringing enemies later in the dungeon back to the staircase once more. It worked, but this was the most cheesiest thing to do in 14 at a level 28 dungeon. 15 minutes later, and we finally met the first boss of the dungeon. We also experienced our first ever boss cleaving mechanic, where basically they'll attack in a cone in front of them, and anybody who's standing next to the tank will get hurt as well. It took a bit for us to learn, but we learned. Now, here comes the hard part. Crazy, I know. The earlier part of Hawk Manor wasn't supposed to be hard, but this upcoming part is. There are multiple cells in the dungeon of Hawk Manor, and in these cells, we will need to find the correct key to open up the next boss's door. Thankfully for us, the boss key is always in the same cell, but it's hiding behind a group of many enemies, and we need to get past them first. And you know me, I like to pull big, so we had to go for it. And I had some close calls, just a bit close. I died here and got revived, but something amazing happened. I had a light bulb moment. As I was getting up, Glass Mage grabbed all the aggro, and the enemies chased after her like a pack of wolves after a rabbit. And she ran her ass immediately out of the vicinity and we couldn't catch up to her. But the best part is, we don't actually have to kill all these mobs. We can just go find the right cell that has the boss room key. So we were able to get the key and move on to the boss, just as soon as everybody shows up to help me fight the boss. And to save you the time, the boss was super easy, and so was the final boss after that. Overall, the dungeon wasn't too bad, minus the very rough beginning. After some more MSQ quests and breaking some large rocks, yeah, that was a thing that happened during the MSQ, we finally made it to the cheese and wine portion of the MSQ, and this haunted me because of how long and kind of tedious and boring it was. But we finally reached the next dungeon, which is Brave Flock's Long Stop. The initial start hurt because there were so many mobs we had to get through, and the first boss came with a few ads, which made it very more tiresome to deal with. And the boss also gives out a lot of poison stacks, so we had to purge that quickly with Asuna to make healing much more easier. At a certain point, the boss just kept summoning so many minions and it got really hard to deal with, but we had to start employing some sleep tactics to put them to sleep. Things were looking good. Until they weren't. We managed to recover, but that was because we were able to juggle the mobs between all of us much better, and we finally got Meowsades back up. Boss number 2 had me a little bit worried because I knew there was going to be another ad appearing during the battle, but we easily can put the boss to sleep and the ad, so there was nothing to fear. Just turned it into a 1v1 basically, or 1v4 in our case. Boss 3 was a snooze, and so was boss 4, and that was the end of that dungeon. On to the 4th stream of the series. There was actually a huge gap between this and the last one, but we finally got back to making the series happen. And our first recorded trial was with Titan, the big man chicken nugget looking guy. I decided to just Leroy Jenkins the fight without a plan, and we go right in, and honestly the fight was nothing wild. We got through it really easily. He does occasionally throw out these landslide moves where basically if you get hit by one, you'll be sent off the platform and you effectively die in one shot. And I low-key wanted to actually ride one of these landslides and just die just to kind of feel something, but thankfully the intrusive thoughts didn't win this time. The nugget went down and we moved into the next part of the game where the Scion base gets under attack, and normally I skip cutscenes, but I really wanted to watch this cutscene for this one part here. God damn. A few hours later, we have the next dungeon unlocked, Stone Vigil. It sucks because this dungeon is a level 41 dungeon, which is so close to having my first AoE attack, Holy, which can stun enemies for a bit, and it's a much needed skill for a large amount of enemies to fight. I will admit though, the mobs of enemy that we have to fight in dungeons is getting a bit better with the more tools we get. The first boss wasn't too bad either, but he was chunking our group for a lot if you're not paying attention. And when it comes to the mob fights, even though we do have more tools, we still gotta be really careful about how much we fight. Now, for boss number 2, however, things go pretty smooth in the beginning, and the latest tank buster we encountered, Takumi tanks it like a champ. But then we encountered the next tank buster, and never mind, these are bad. Ooh! Takumi takes a whole tank buster and dies. This was scary because when you compare it to the tank busters we saw before, we were able to brush these off, but now we actually need to start preparing. The final boss of this dungeon is a dragon, which I honestly should have respected a lot more. I found this dragon to be slow, stupid, and easily dodged his attacks. But I think he must have heard my thoughts because... Oh, I love Monster Hunter. Yeah, I'm a huge Monster Hunter fan. What? What? I don't know how he one-shotted me, but he just did. And it wasn't even a tank buster as far as I know, so it just caught everybody off guard. Besides those 2 deaths that I highlighted in this dungeon, we got out fine, but this is where I started having some doubts and worries about the run. And soon, those worries start to come true. In stream number 5, we finally face Garuda, the next trial boss. Garuda at first seemed really simple, and I was trying to remember what I knew about the fight from memory. Until me and the rest of the group remembers that there are mechanics that we actually have to do for this fight. And by the time we realized, it was too late. That's right? Oh shit. Just get ready to heal. Oh shit. Okay. We actually have to do mechanics. When you take a look at the middle of the arena, you'll notice that there are 4 stone pillars. These pillars are essential to surviving Garuda's big attack later on. These pillars are also fragile, so any attack by the enemies can't actually affect them. And the less pillars to protect you, the more Garuda's aerial blast will hurt you. We needed to start respecting A Realm Reborn content at this point because we can die if we do not respect the mechanics and do them properly. We focused up and went in for round 2. The goal, protect the pillars as much as possible. She just loves to also attack random players throughout the fight. It's just a quirk she does. She's quirky like that. Just as she was getting ready to do her frontal attack, I luckily saved Quarter Knight from near death. Whew, you're welcome, Quarter Knight. She starts summoning her ads, which basically beeline for the pillars, and we need to get rid of these as soon as possible, but oh man, would it be so satisfying to have my holy attack. But this is a level 44 trial, and that is a 45 skill, which I cannot use just yet in this trial. We take down the ads, and we focused up on her, and then survived her grand finale attack, and it was smooth sailing. In a really weird anticlimactic fashion, she dies off screen as she teleports out, so she must have died to one of our dots or something during the fight. With Garuda out of the way, we are now actually at the end game of A Realm Reborn. We have basically 2 dungeons to do and 1 really tough boss fight at the end. We make our way to the first dungeon, Castra Merindiandium. I think that's how you say it. Part 1 of the 3-part finale. And at this point, we have access to most of our kits, so we can actually finally use Holy to stun enemies and hit multiple enemies at once. It was so satisfying. It felt so great, guys. You have no idea how happy I was. Boss number 1 was the Black Eft, which honestly was really simple. I just wish it was made quicker with more damaging abilities, but hey, we're healers. We take what we can get. Boss number 2 was the Magitech Vanguard F1, and it was a really straightforward fight as well, until it tank busted me for nearly all of my HP, and if I wasn't full HP and had my shield on me, it would have been way worse. I was starting to be very worried about tank busters at this point. And also, for this boss, I've never seen so many tank busters thrown out in such a short span, and my HP was dropping, and it was getting stressful every single time I kept getting targeted. The lead up to the final boss was simple, and we finally faced off against Livia, the Sylph Kicker herself. Her fight honestly can be a jump in difficulty for new players when compared to the other fights prior to this. And here was when we really needed to respect her damage and tank busters. Ovid's max HP is 2377, and he was hit for a 2484, meaning he absolutely needed a shield in order to survive this hit, or he will start dying. If he actually had ate some food prior to this to get the food buffs, he probably would have survived this. When it came my turn to tank the tank buster, I survived thankfully for having a full HP and a shield on top of it all. Phanton takes the next tank busters and honestly survives with barely any worries. Actually king shit. Needless to say, fights in this game are starting to get a bit rougher, and we needed to start respecting every single thing and start having our HP up and our shields up as well. After knocking Livia down to about 20 HP, she started doing her endless barrage of AoE moves. We healed through it, but I would hate to see what would happen if we just let her keep attacking, and maybe that damage would have kept ramping up and eventually just wiped us out all the way. And we defeated Livia. With part 1 of the finale down, there are 2 more parts, and hopefully things get easier. I was wrong. Praetorium was the next dungeon we had to get through, and honestly, a majority of this dungeon was trivial. The real challenge of this dungeon for the most part was trying to stay awake and not bored because of all the unskippable cutscenes. And alright, we had a close call here with a group of enemies, but you know how I do, baby. We always gotta pull big, and it makes people sweat, and I enjoy that. First boss was a cakewalk. And here during this portion of the dungeon, we're on these Magitech weapons, these mech-like things to fight the next horde of enemies, and I respect my teammate Big Stack for getting off his robot and keeping this a pure healer run for himself, but hey, it was a tool given to us and we're still healers technically, so it was fair game. After the robot segment, we had to fight Nero, and his tank buster took me down to 58 HP. 58. And tank buster number 2? Oh, no! My mod, Lava Spike, got hit with a tank buster here and survived because he had way more HP than I do, so then it hit me here. He had his food buff up and I didn't. I needed to start doing this or else I will start having a lot of deaths on my hands. It is pretty much critical at this point that I must be using food buffs at all times, and probably going forward, this is probably the plan. We defeated Nero, and then it's on to the next and final boss of the dungeon, but not the base game of 14, Gaius Van Baelsar. His tank buster didn't really hit me for much, and honestly, everything was going really well until it didn't. He hit me with 2 attacks back to back and killed me instantly. He proceeded to start killing us back to back, and finally, his grand finale attack came out. Here is where he summons multiple images of himself and starts channeling his blade energy. If we don't succeed in killing all of the images before his blade energy hits 100 on the meter, then we will instantly wipe and we'll have to restart the fight once more. This is basically the boss's enrage. Boss's enrages are basically a way of punishing players for not playing cleanly enough. We need to get past this damage check and do do as much damage as we can before he wrecks us. It's essentially a race against time. And unlucky for us, we took a few deaths going into it, and while a death is sometimes, you know, natural and it happens, this was a huge no-no going in when it comes to damage checks, because when you die in 14, you're hit with a debuff that basically lowers all your combat stats by 25%, which is not a good thing. We call this weakness. So basically, when you're trying to do your best and pump out damage, but you're already reduced by 25% as a healer, it's going to be very tight and really rough. And to make matters worse, if you happen to die while you have weakness on you, then you'll be put with brink of death instead when you revive. Instead of having a 25% reduction in your stats, you'll be hit with a 50% reduction. This is a big no. We don't want that at all when we need damage most of all. Finally, we had one more clone left, but he was really healthy and that blade energy meter was at 95%. It was not looking good at all. And in fact, it wasn't good at all because... oh shit. Shield up. Wait. We couldn't shield through all of that damage, and there's no way we can get around this other than to just fight the clones and deal a lot of damage. We have to eat our food buffs so we can have a bit of extra stats because every single percent matters, and during that stage in the fight, we have to use our combat potions to give us a bit of an edge during this 30-second window where we can do a bit more damage. Hey guys, Editor Ko here from the future. I just want to say that I did notice at this point I was using the wrong potion. I should have been using potions of mind and not intelligence, so I was being dumb here. The mind stat actually affects healers, not intelligence, so my bad guys. So basically, we had to take this fight as seriously as we can as if it was hard content, like a savage or an ultimate. And once again, it would be ideal to enter the damage check fight without any weakness debuff, so meaning we cannot have any deaths prior to that point. Unfortunately for attempt number 2, our group died before we even reached the damage check, so we really needed to focus up on our play. For attempt number 3, we were already 44 minutes into our Praetorium run, and normally it would take like people 30 minutes to run this, but it was a bit of a struggle. This time we were playing so on point, and I was really proud of my group for really pulling it together. I almost died here, but my group heals me just in time. Ugh, they're so cracked, I swear. Now it's time for the damage check, and we had no deaths going in, so it was looking really good for us. We had to basically play to near perfection on this fight. It was absolutely crucial for us to use our potions here for a temporary buff. Combat pots can only be used every 4 to 5 minutes due to their cooldown, so we had to use it here and nowhere else prior. And it is a terrible feeling when you miss that damage check by like 1%, you're so close to clearing just because you didn't use your potion at the right moment. Our strat here was to throw our dots onto the other clones while burning one at a time. 78% on the blade energy, and the boss's clone was looking really healthy. 90, 91, 93, then 96%, and we succeeded. His move tickles us, and we finished out the fight, and we were finally done with the Gaius fight. We finished the fight, and honestly, excuse my reaction here, I was just faking as if this was my first time clearing the fight. It was a stream thing. We were just being silly at this moment. With the Gaius down, 2/3 of the finale is done. Only one more part left. A fight against the Arum Reborn final boss, Ultima, the ultimate weapon. Normally, Ultima is one of the easiest fights of the game. Ultima has 2 phases, and phase 1 is the simplest of the 2. Getting to phase 2, however, will normally take you about 20 minutes because of the cutscenes that you cannot skip in phase 1's fight. During phase 1, there's no pressure to do a lot of damage, no enrages, no damage checks. In fact, the fight ends at 20%, so just take our time with it and clear it as fast as we can. It's more of a show than a fight with the boss having all these cutscenes and things happening during the battle. Just simply heal, do damage, and stand and let thing resolve. Sorry. After phase 1 and a cutscene, it puts us 18 minutes into the battle, and the rest of the time can be used to fight phase 2. Now, while phase 1 was simple, phase 2, however, is a doozy. This boss actually has a real tank buster that will annihilate anyone who gets it. We need huge damage mitigation or shielding, or people will in fact die. Oh, shit! I take a whole tank buster to my face with full HP and a shield, and I'm just gone. Overall, the rest of the fight has some mechanics and attacks that may catch new players off guard, but I'm a vet, so I'm used to a lot of these things I've seen before. The biggest hurdle for us was that tank buster, and if we do not take care of it properly, people will just die and get that weakness debuff. Pink gets a tank buster right here, and we're all holding our breaths right now. Thankfully, last second, he gets a huge shield, and it stops him from dying. Shields are indicated by the yellow yellow bar that appears on somebody's HP. And if you notice, he had a huge shield when compared to a normal other shields that people get. This is what we call a critical shield, or crit shield for short. This shield is a massive shield that can happen just by chance, so we have to just be really lucky during this fight to get this as often as we can to survive that tank buster. But it's possible to survive that tank buster, and this is great news. But unlucky for Pink this time, he takes the tank buster and dies, so we absolutely need those critical shields. And oh man, do these tank busters just straight up hurt. The fight itself was a long dance, but we eventually reached the boss's enrage. Ultima. Yes, the boss's name is Ultima, and his ultimate attack is called Ultima. Yeah, he starts channeling his most powerful attack that will absolutely obliterate us. This new damage check starts around 28 to 30 HP, and we have to bring it down to 0 fast. During this phase though, thankfully, he just channels his attack and does nothing else, so that just means we drop all kinds of healing and everything and just spam our attacks as much as we can. Now, in a traditional party, having 2 DPSs make this fight much more smooth and easier. As Ultima is channeling his ability, we also receive a buff ourselves by our goddess basically, Hydaelyn. There is a problem with Hydaelyn's buff though. Her buff starts off at 1 stack and eventually ends at 4, giving us the full benefit at that point only. When we do finally get the buff, we get a bit of a damage boost. And unfortunately for us, the full benefit of this buff doesn't roll out until Ultima reaches nearly 50% of its charge bar, so the window of receiving the buff and doing a lot of damage is really small. During this part as well, you do get a limit break 3, meaning you can use a big special attack to basically finish off Ultima. But you can't use that ability unless you are a DPS, so we have none of those. Using the healer's limit break 3, you only just basically revive everybody who's on the ground and heal them to full HP, but that has no effect at this point. We just need straight damage. We only have our normal attacks as healers to do damage, so we have to pray and just do as much damage as we can. We reach 4% HP on the boss before we just straight up die. But it is worth noting that we did go into that enrage with 1 weakness and we did not pop our potions, so there could be a chance we could actually clear this fight, possibly, if we just play to near perfection. The fight itself was nearly 13 minutes long, so we have to do a slow march back to where we were before. Round 2 time. These tank busters just hurt so much, and you also need to get away from the boss as far as you can if you have it, because he does follow up with a sneaky auto attack, so if you happen to survive the tank buster, he may just smack you to death right after. We make our long fight back to Ultima's enrage, and unfortunately, we came close but did not get the kill. Enrage at 3%. We left the instance because we did not believe we had enough time to clear this fight in this go, so sadly all that effort was almost for nothing. But we did gain a lot of knowledge. We took a second to regroup and plan for the fight better. Pink hands me some better food, so hopefully this should help with the fight a bit more. We then took the time to upgrade my gear to something a bit better. We were thinking that maybe if we came in with better food, gear, pots, we could probably have a better chance to clear. I started rocking the clown hat because, well, this was the best gear at my level at this point that I could get. And my choice of servers was now biting me in the ass because the Dynamis server has the worst market board for buying gear. Nobody was selling anything for my level. For the next go, we decided to swap the jobs around. This time, we came in with 2 Astros, thinking that their card buffing abilities will help our damage to help us get the win this time. Unless I'm looking at this wrong, Takami's HP literally drops to 1 HP, then back up to 27 after taking the tank buster. That is a close one. This time we were able to take on the tank busters and survive. Just kidding, they still hurt. Getting to this fight takes so long. It took us nearly 2 hours to get to this point, and we still could not get the clear. During the next break session, I started asking for some big help. I asked my friend Zesh for his advice because he's an expert raider. Somebody also suggested to me to go Scholar and use their Art of War attack, which is basically an AoE, and get as close as possible, and use my character's auto attack with the books to do extra damage. Because apparently the Scholar books do way more auto damage than the other healers. I didn't know if they were trolling or not, so I just kept this in mind. While I did have some doubters watching me thinking that this was almost impossible if I didn't have a DPS, there were some viewers who actually believed that I can do this.
I believe in you.
I don't. This has been rough. We start theorizing what is the best healer combination to do as much damage as we can, and Zesh suggested that we bring double sages, an astro, and a white mage. We bring the sages because they have the most damage abilities when compared to other healers at level 50, astros for their cards so they can give us a damage buff, and white mage because, Well, I only had White Mage unlocked at this point in time, so yeah. And from the intel that we've gathered from doing the previous runs, we now know that the boss will not go into enrage phase until below 30% HP. Now that we know that, we can try and prevent any deaths before that point so nobody walks in with weakness. It's taken so many attempts, but we are finally unlocking the winning formula for this fight, and this is the winning formula. We need to go into enrage phase with no weakness or deaths. We need our food buffs on at all times. Have our damage over times be reapplied as soon as they drop. Use our pots around the same time we get Heidelin's buff so we can get as much damage as we can out. This one's a little bit crazy, but we have to try to lock the boss into an animation of an attack so that way we can buy ourselves a little bit more time to do damage before he goes into enrage phase below 30. And we've ran this fight so many times that we know that there's a pattern to all this. And finally, we just have to play our hearts out and spam as many attacks as we can and pray for critical hits. Seems like a lot, but honestly, we got this. We actually made some huge progress as we finally got the boss down to 1% for the first time ever. The next run after that, we got to 0.8%, but sadly, it's been 6 hours in this whole entire stream and I was getting really tired. We had only 3 minutes left in this instance alone, and I decided to call it just there for the night because it was getting late for me. It was getting closer, but it still felt so far away from the clear, and I ended stream and decided to wait until tomorrow. But I had a secret weapon for the next stream and quite possibly the key to clearing. The plan was the same. We had to basically follow everything we said on the winning formula to success, but this time, I grabbed a new healer job. I retired White Mage for the next attempt and then grabbed Scholar thanks to my mod Pink Nail Boy. Here are a few reasons as to why Scholar could be the key to success. Scholars have an attack spell called Energy Drain. For each cast of Energy Drain, it uses one Aether Flow, the Scholar's resources. If we manage to use our resources properly, we can actually spam 5 to 6 Energy Drains, which could mean the difference between clearing and not clearing. Scholar is a shield healer. In 14, there are currently 2 regeneration healers and 2 shield healers. Regen healers are great for just straight up heals, while shield healers, as the name implies, are great for mitigating damage with their shields and defensive abilities. With Scholar's Fey Illumination ability, we can straight up reduce damage by 5%, making those tank busters even more survivable. During the enrage phase, I need to walk up to the boss and smack him with my book. And at the same time, spam my Art of War ability because this is normally an AoE attack, right? But it actually does a bit more damage than the Scholar's Ruin attack. Ruin has a 150 potency, while Art of War has a 165. And 165 is a lot more than 150. While the White Mage Stone 2 does have more potency, we believe that everything we listed for Scholar was enough to justify picking that over White Mage for this run. Now that we've settled all of that, it's time to fight our way to phase 2 once more. Our first attempt ended at 3%. And honestly, it was a warm-up phase. We just needed to get back in there and try to remember everything slowly. 2 of our members didn't use their pots at the right time, but it's okay. We fixed those mistakes. During attempt number 2, I totally forgot that I was supposed to be up close doing Art of War spam with my auto attacks, and it ended at a 5% enrage. We had to restart and then go back in for attempt 3. My goal here was to make sure I had food buffs up, no weakness from death, and make sure I have enough Aether Flows to spam out during the final phase. Okay boys, the plan is simple. Ideally, I would like 3 Aether Flows ready and then have the Aether Flow ability itself ready to go. This allows me to basically use my Aether Flows that's currently in my gauge and then immediately after just basically reset and have 3 more ready to go. I may have to use 1 Aether Flow for Fey Illumination to prevent any deaths from tank busters, but that's okay because we want to have at least 5 for a lot of damage as much as possible. Now we need to wait for Ultima to get around 30% HP, have Mira have her cards ready for buffs, and we are good to go. Once the boss was locked into an animation, we decided it was time to push, and we went for it. This time, the boss was down to 0.5%. 0.5%. This was so close. We didn't refresh our dots on the boss properly, and mistakes like that will cost us the run, so we needed to fix that immediately. And during our break, world-renowned solo gamer Wrath Games himself showed up to give us some advice. Thank you, Wrath, for all the advice. On our next attempt, we were waiting and fishing out the best opportune moment to lock the boss in an animation and start the damage phase. When we finally found our moment, we full sent it. We kept our dots up, we used our pots at the right moment, I was spamming my Aether Flows, we were just spamming everything we can. I was so close, I was smacking the boss with my book. Look at those little sword icons. That was the auto and the Art of War spam right next to it. The boss's HP was slowly going down and his bar was charging up and it was looking really, really frightening. There was 3 seconds left on the clock. And then I die here.
What? No way!
But We cleared the fight! The enrage did go off, but it didn't touch the rest of the group yet. From what we can guess, it seems like it's a proximity-based enrage? Because I was so close smacking him with my book, I died first before the enrage finally hit everyone else. In fact, it was so close that if you go back and look at the footage, the number value from the enrage was slowly being given out to the teammates, but before it could finally be given out, the boss died and they were locked into the viewing cutscene, protected from the enrage and near death. Even my reaction, I had to take a second to realize that we won because I saw myself die and just thought that was it. We just lost once more. A big shout outs to Mira Ocelot, Takumi Codex, and Pink Nailboy for suffering with me the whole time and finally getting the clear with me. But honestly, a big shout out to Pink because he was almost there every step of the way, and I love you so much for all the help and support, Pink. Thank you so much. One more instance fight with La Habrea, and honestly, this is meant to be done with any job, so it was basically a victory lap at this point. I've actually never done this fight before because they reworked it. And this part where we're scripted to die and get back up to the tune of the prelude of Final Fantasy, honestly, peak gaming. I'm not gonna lie, I had a tear in my eye going back and editing this, and it was just, oh, so good. I defeated Laha Bread, and that brought an end to the Final Fantasy XIV A Realm Reborn healers only run. So yes, you can in fact beat Final Fantasy XIV with healers only, but I highly don't recommend it. And of course, this is just one part in an ever-growing game that is Final Fantasy XIV. If I was to continue this journey, I will have to deal with things like trials now not just requiring 8 players, but 8 healers, trickier mechanics in other fights, and possibly some walls that will pretty much make the game impossible to beat it with only healers. But hey, you know what? We'll handle that when we get there. People thought Ultima was impossible with only healers, but we made it happen. My next big hurdle is to get to Heaven's Ward, the first expansion of Final Fantasy XIV. But before then, I will need to do an alliance raid which consists of 24 other healers to take on a whole raid together. So, I guess there's only one thing left to say here, and that's, who is down to heal with me? Thank you for watching, but honestly, big thank yous to all my patrons at patreon.com. By pledging to my Patreon, you'll get access to my Discord server where I hang out with you guys, talk with you, and you can ask me literally any kind of questions you want. So, hope to see you soon, and thank you to everybody who's Patreon to me. So that's Lava Spike, Brother Gamer MW3, Chopstick Sue, Ethan, Omar, Mr. Anderson, EF, Miru Buns, Arl, Zephyr, Aqua no Kisuke, Vantanagi, and Calamity Codex. Thank you guys so much for the support, and to anybody out there, your name can also be in the credits here as well if you Patreon. See you guys in the future.